I had to do this video because I bought really cheaply for £20 UK pounds, so about $30 this portable battery rechargeable oscilloscope. So dirt cheap that I had to buy it because it's really useful for diagnosing problems on cars or anything else comes to that matter. So on here I had an intermittent fault of the signal coming from the sensor, crankshaft sensor. You might have a similar problem with camshaft sensor. They're both electronic hall type sensors, the same on most cars nowadays. And it was intermittent, a couple stop, and fault code P0335 I think it was would come up, which is crankshaft sensor failure. Eventually I got it home, got a big oscilloscope on it. Managed to catch it actually failing after it started again. Saw it fail, and I saw the pulses coming out of the sensor were narrowing and disappearing, which is why it stopped. But does it very rarely, very intermittently. I put a new sensor on it and did it again, which still was pointing to the sensor on the signals coming out of it. But to give me some more data, what would be useful to do is have the oscilloscope showing all of the time and have it in the car, and then when it fails you can see it failing. And I've also got a multimeter that I've attached to the power going into the sensor, so if the signal ever fails then we know it's either the sensor or possibly the pull-up resistor in the ECU. We could move on to that later if that is the case, but if the pulse is narrowing then it's almost certainly the sensor, which is what I originally saw. So I've interrupted or got to the wires that go to the sensor. There's 3 wires here. One of them is 0 volts, one of them is 12 volt from the battery, and the other is the output signal from the sensor, which is 0 to 5 volts in this case. Now let's start up and just show you the typical signal we get out of there. So here's the oscilloscope. It shows the square wave pulse coming out of the sensor. It's quite useful, this. You've got a few different modes on it. Let's just scroll over to the time zone, time adjustment, and then zoom out and you see this little black spot that's moving left and right. That's the missing 2 and a bit pulses out of the sequence, which shows where top dead center is on the engine. The other pulses just the teeth on the flywheel, the sensor teeth that is picking up through the sensor, and this is about 0 to 5 volts. Okay, let's see if we get a signal when we're starting now, after it's been turned off for 5 minutes heat soaking. So that's fine. Let's run it a bit longer. And the other thing to monitor is the battery voltage going to the sensor. So see the video description for buying links for this little gadget. It's on eBay, as I say, around £20 from the UK, obviously made in China, like a lot of stuff. And there's quite a lot of different sellers on eBay, probably Amazon as well, so look out for those links. Multimeter the same. These you can pick up anywhere from about £5. And on this car, which is a Freelander V6, Freelander 1, we can fairly easily route some cabling from the sensor into the car. See, I've taken this panel off here, taken this bit off, a couple of little fittings, that's the way to remove them. Stick a screw in the top, pull up on the plastic to pull the thing out, dead easy. And on the Freelander, it's got a drain point here, where my hand is, this little thing here. That drains out of the scuttle panel any water, so you can get your finger up in there. Here's my finger. Get the cable up there, and there's a little grommet where I'm pointing there that you can pop out. And eventually, if you poke a wire through there, inside, take out the cup holder from the top of the dash, take out the clock, and eventually you can just see a bit of light shining through there. You can poke a wire through, get it under here, put something in the car that you can continuously monitor your car with. So this is the crank sensor. I did buy another new one because I've already got one new one in there, which wasn't any better than the one I replaced. So I've gone for a better make this time, Delphi. Top quality one, certainly they are on glue plugs when I tested them before. That's the part number if you're interested for the Freelander V6. But there's a lot of different manufacturers that make these. When I looked on the internet, at least half a dozen or so. Crank sensor itself is very easy to change, at least once you've taken off the under tray. On this engine it is just up. Yeah, you can just see it right in the middle of the picture there. Did put that additional heat shield on to keep heat away from the exhaust. Don't know whether that made any difference or not. So yeah, quite easy to get to. The other thing you might want to do to diagnose the failure of a sensor, crankshaft or camshaft, is get some freezer spray, this sort of stuff, and when your car stops or won't start, spray it onto the sensor, because 9 out of 10 times you'll find that the sensor fails when it gets hot. This is the camshaft sensor, even easier to get to, very similar position on a lot of engines. So the engine cover obviously I've removed, and so I could leave it off, which contains the filter on this engine. I put this other filter on to maybe temporarily, maybe permanently set it up like that. It's a performance high flow filter. Again, that was only about 20 quid. These bits were lying around my garage from another job, so quite easy to fit. And yeah, allows me to keep an eye on and get access to the cables going to the sensor. So as I say, if you find the engine doesn't start and it's given either a camshaft, which is here, sensor, or a crankshaft sensor failure, try spraying it with some freezer spray. 9 out of 10 times that'll bring it back to life and enable you to get home. If the crankshaft sensor fails while you're driving along, the engine will stop. In my experience, if the camshaft sensor fails, it'll keep going while you're driving, just using the signal from the crankshaft sensor. And but then when you stop and try and restart, it needs a good signal from the camshaft to start up. And there, in that case, by freezing it, or you could take it out and put it in ice, you would be able to start up the engine just to get you home before you can get a new sensor. So I paid for this with my own money, wasn't sponsored to do this video or anything. Thought it'd be a useful thing to have for a very cheap price, as I say, around £20. And also useful, of course, for lots of electronics. It's quite a good sampling rate. Look up the spec for yourself. Let's see what it goes down to in terms of time per division. It goes down to 10 microseconds per division, which means 100 kilohertz waveform would fill one of these divisions. And there's my diagnostic setup inside the car. So anytime that sensor fails, you can instantly confirm that it's failing, and it'll also give you some clues as to why it's failing, whether it's the power to it or in what way the sensor's failing. So here I managed to go for a drive and the sensor fail, and you can see here, without the engine running or turning over, completely stationary, warning light on, there's a weird signal coming from the sensor, which is not correct at all, because there should be no signal from the sensor. So I would say that is definitely the sensor that's gone. And just turn my meter back on again. There's definitely battery voltage going to it. So what I'm going to try now is squirting a bit of freezer spray on it, see if that fixes it. Alright, freezer spray sprayed on it. That weird signal coming out of the sensor's gone away. Let's see if she starts. No, no signal coming out of it at all. So it's now completely packed up. Definitely the sensor, I would say, because it's 0 volts, which means I think that the sensor is pulling down the output signal all of the time, or possibly, I suppose, the pull-up resistor in the ECU is gone, but that previous weird signal wouldn't tend to indicate that. So here's the new sensor fitted, the Delphi one. Let's try and see if it starts. There's the signal, yeah, and it starts with a good signal. Let's just zoom in a little bit on the shape of the waveform. There we go, the correct signal, which confirms that it was the sensor that was faulty. So very useful to have that oscilloscope. Good little diagnostic tool. Definitely confirmed that the sensor was gone, and very unlikely to be anything to do with the ECU, because the sensor output was going all over the place, and the ECU was just an input, not an output. So yeah, great gadget for diagnosing especially intermittent electrical problems on your car. Okay, thanks for watching, hope that helps, and I thought it worth doing because it's quite a useful gadget. An oscilloscope on the Jeep. Stay tuned for any other ideas that will come in handy. Ways to fix things or gadgets. Please subscribe, click on the like if you like it, and click on the bell button when you subscribe to be notified of new videos. Cheers, bye.